There's,
The shoe capital.
oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Shoe. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. There's
Yeah.
the best. That's education. Okay.
I'm Sharon Miranda, the Learning Development Manager in Early Education. I was born in the Philippines, from Manila, but then was raised here. I was raised in Daly City, but now I live in the North Bay.
Ah, I see. What part of the North Bay?
Solano County.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a group of folks there that get together every now and then. The Filipino Americans, they hang out with some Native Americans also. They're close by.
A lot of Filipinos.
Hi, Oscar. Natasha Z, Executive Assistant to Richard. Originally from China, but right now I live near San Francisco State University.
Oh, wow.
Hi,
Hi.
Sebastian Alioto, CFO from San Francisco.
All right. I went to St. Ignatius High School, where the Alioto at the time was a mayor, or it wasn't. It wasn't Alioto was a mayor. The woman too in the 70s. Yeah. He donated a whole bunch of money to that school, so maybe your kids can go there for free. Check it out.
He just graduated a week ago.
There you go. There you go.
You went there?
Yeah. When I 61, I think I got out.
So I'll tell you my age.
What is it?
I was there the first day the new school opened.
Ah, wow. Yeah, that
Right?
new school, I have bad feelings about it because they took all
Everybody
my father's
did.
money
Yep.
and went someplace else, yeah. I never tasted that new school, but I lived near it a few times when I became a teacher. I taught there, substituting. All right, yeah.
My name is Mario Quintanilla. I'm the recruiter here from NC, and I'm originally from El Salvador.
Ah, okay.
Hi, I'm Erica Bibi Lagracia. I'm the HR generalist and I'm from Manila, Philippines, specifically in Quezon City. Both my parents were in Quezon City, but then my dad's side, they all grew up in Bicol. But my dad grew up in Quezon City, so.
Oh, yeah, yeah. My folks have the same kind. My family, half my family went to the Bicol area where you talking about, and then now they're in the Quezon City area where you're talking about.
Maybe
Where
we're all,
in Quezon City?
yeah, we're in Quezon City by like BF Homes.
Oh, BF Homes, yeah. I think that's all right. I'm from
Really?
there too.
You're related.
I'm from
Cousins.
Yeah, by Commonwealth.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, now we're
Yeah.
in the Tagisara area.
Oh,
Yeah.
Freeway.
It's a
That's
small-
what happens, yeah.
Thank you,
Yes.
Erica. Really?
Hi.
I'm Baby Gonzalez, Filolo here, and I'm born in Oakland, but my dad is from Mexico, and I'm also Nicaragua.
David Ruddy, Administrative Assistants. I was born and raised in San Francisco. My mother's from Mindanao.
Ah, what part of Mindanao, remember?
Eagles Salvador del Sur?
Ah, yeah, that one too is big. They don't have any boundaries. I don't know how big, I know it's big, yeah. Yes.
Ana Cobos, Administration Director at MSC, and I'm from Spain,
Ah, I see. What part of Spain?
Madrid.
I have cousins there also. Yeah, I have stories later, yeah.
So, it's my pleasure today to introduce our friend. I'll pass his book for some of you received, I think some of his books we had bought and given out to people before. But if you want any after, we can get them as well from our dear friend and guest today. Oscar was born in Barugo, Leyte. At 5 years old, he moved to Manila. At 12, he moved to Vancouver. At 17 to San Francisco, where he's been most of the time ever since. But he is, in my opinion, the foremost historian, poet, writer, playwright, an expert on the Philippines that I've ever met. Greatest expert, and from ancient to current to California to West Coast to U.S. and American Filipino experience, but just such a knowledgeable person about it. I've learned a lot from him about the Philippines, and mostly, it's important to me because my his little Lola from Tarlac, countries outside of Manila.
Yeah.
So it's a real important part of her life, and the Philippines has been a part of all of our lives from forever because the Filipinos are the Mexicans of on the water. And we're the same so many ways, but we've also mixed. People don't know parts of it, and it's part of the introduction where we came in. I told Oscar when I met him in San Diego. I told him, you know, at one point San Diego was one of the biggest barrios in the country, but at least 30% of my parents' age were mixed Filipinos because of the laws that wouldn't let them marry Caucasians, but they used to sneak in and marry Mexicans. That's how we have so many. My godfather was half Filipino. My father's best friends were half Filipino. So many people were. That was a given that that's who we were, and it's just so it's interesting. And then, of course, he was affiliated with the Farm Workers Union. AWOC before the strike and at the beginning of the strike in Delano, and so he went up to Alaska where he spent many seasons working in the cannery there, and had a lot of adventures. Has written a lot about it. But the crews from Delano, once they struck the Delano crews, they stayed intact. A bunch of them went to Alaska where he was to work in Alaska in the cannery. Anyway, without any further ado, I'm excited to introduce my dear friend, Oscar Peneranda.
Thank you very much. I was going to maybe do my talk covering whatever that interests you. I'm a teacher, so I had all these things. So maybe if you can think of something that you heard about Filipinos, but even if but you don't exactly know why, or you see anything about them, and then you sort of, when I explain it or try to put it together, everybody will get something from it. For example, I'll give you an example. People always ask me, not just me, but I have a friend, Carlos Cialcita, harmonica player, musician. Plays the blues. He travels, plays the music with the black guys. Right? He's got so that they always will say, how come you are traveling with the black guys with a Mexican name, and then you say you're Filipino, and then you're your grandmother from Spain. So they can't sort of figure out the connections. So to me, when you do history, it's good when the word for history in Tagalog is kasaysayan. In English, it's history. So but the word in Tagalog does not. Just because it happened, it's not history. In other words, it has to have meaning. It becomes history when it has meaning. Something happens, broken glass happened. That's not history, but if it has meaning to specific the present, then. And that's incorporated in that word. So when you, Richard, were talking about history, when we were talking earlier, in high school, every year they have a survey where they talk what's the most boring subject that you get. It's always number one. History is always boring to them, because to me, the system and the teachers don't look at history the way the young people should. Apprehend history, because history, if you get the young folks to think about it, is one of the most interesting. It's just like what they're doing now. For example, you get frustrated when you want to know about a certain history and you can't, or you don't have any, so you get frustrated. So people in the education system, so that's what people like me were confronted with when we struck for ethnic studies. Richard was talking about the essence of ethnic studies is always under, because the thing is that ethnic studies to me is the equality of any studies, because when I went to school, I didn't study anything but white folks. The one who I'm glad that they introduced me to Shakespeare, to all this other stuff that I read, because that became my good. But I'm not glad that they did not introduce me to the black and brown writers that were all around all the time. So I had to look for it for myself. So I had to make that connection. And doing that community played a big role, because the meaning of education to me is after you get all that stuff, you have to bring it back to a community to benefit, to some kind of community, wherever you are, you know. Most folks go to school and I guess get good grades to get money or something. That's not the education that I'm talking about. Yeah. The other one is, for example, the issue with language, because I know some of my young folks here are more familiar with the Filipino language or a Filipino language. Some are not as familiar, and it's kind of important because when you know different languages, it's like language is it's the number one vessel of culture. I think it's the way you see the world. I'll give you an example. In English, there's rainbow. Right? The word rainbow, you know, because we have the word rainbow. After the rain, there's this arch in the sky with different colors, and that's rainbow. That's how we perceive the world. It's the English-speaking world. But in Tagalog and a few other Philippine languages, that's not our word for rainbow. Is bahaghari. Bahaghari. Bahaghari means loincloth of the king. Has nothing to do with the rainbow. So in those days, I guess the king was privileged to have different beautiful clothing, and the lower classes were just the white, and so the loincloth of the king. So how can you two different worlds right away? So that's why I encourage the learning of another language. And my mother, who was also an educator, I used to help her correct papers. I said, I'll never be a teacher, man. So I did the same thing, right? I forgot what she said. I was going to say what she said, but I forgot. But she said, what was I talking about? I was talking about some education, no?
Language.
Communication.
Meaning of words.
Yeah. That's right, the Bahaghari. And my mother, who is also an educator, tried to, I guess, impress those things upon me with music, because she likes to sing and dance. You see, then I have this culture also in me that comes out when you create, when I tell stories. You know? Like I was saying in this passage here, that to me, the city of San Francisco doesn't have a complete story unless it tells our story, you know? Any comments or questions so far? Yeah.
I think I agree with the education aspect of it too, especially the history. Like again, I'm a product of Asian American Studies at SF State. Studied under Alison Santiago Cubales.
Yes, yeah. She tried all her classes in my classes in Logan before she became a teacher.
Yeah, and I think just like going back to like that hunger for like really wanting to know what history is, because when we look at the history now that's being taught, especially that white history, it's the concept of like the meta narrative, right? When we think of meta, it stands for most effective tactic available. So how do we erase people of color's history, teaching them white history, teaching them U.S. history, and not showing how they're reflected within that spectrum, right? So I really agree with that.
Even the word, Richard now was talking about, the word American now means only the United States. I don't know, there's a chapter here that I got really pissed off about it for a long time, you know. I sort of equated the both for a while, but after a while, critically, I looked at it. A lot of people in the media are using America and the U.S. interchangeably. And that's not, the United States, and I mean, America, that's half the world is freaking America. Man. That's half the hemisphere. America's the hemisphere. How did we, as a country, U.S., appropriate that only for ourselves and make the world think that way? So I sort of started talking about it, because it's not really accurate, right? I mean, if that's their concept of America, U.S., South America must be Texas or Louisiana or something. Chicago is Central America? I don't know. It confuses educators and the students. Geography-wise, it's screwed up. So that's one thing. It's critical. It's got to be critical. And every time I hear the media use America for the U.S. alone, I get something goes off. You know, I get. Yeah.
So you alluded to helping your mom correct papers because she was a teacher, and then you not wanting to be a teacher, but yet here you are a professor. What changed?
Oh yeah.
Like, how did you get down that road?
Yeah. I guess if I figure out almost everything I've learned, I learned from women. If I look at they weren't all nice things, but they were all most of them. And my mom was, and they didn't teach. And my aunt, my father had 6 sisters. I think they were all teachers, except for one. And so those sort of raised me. Even when I became a teacher, I still was not convinced I was a teacher to myself, because I was a writer. You know, I started writing when I was 14 or 13, when I was still in Vancouver, and I thought I could do this in my limited way. I thought that was my role, and then teaching. And then at the time when I was growing up, it was Richard can attest to this. James Bond was all those cool dudes. They're not teachers. You know, the cool dudes were, and then the teachers were portrayed. So it was not in our image to. And then this culture did not really respect teachers to begin with. Of course, I did know all that stuff, and I was influenced by it. Until I went to I left SF State already. I still wasn't convinced I was a teacher. I think somewhere when I get kind of choked up. Somewhere when maybe in Logan High School. I used to even bullshit people just and say, no, are you a teacher? Well, you know, I teach, but I really play the piano in a whorehouse or something. You know, I could make it more colorful. I said in an interview someplace. But you leave a legacy when you're a teacher, bigger than you.
It's a good question. Good answer.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Manongs in California and what that means? What should it mean to younger people today to understand it? What it means to the history of California and what it means to understanding our Manongs and our past?
First, in the background, we should know that financially, the agribusiness of California, in 1 year, made more than all the gold rush money put together. They make a lot of money, man. That's why our labor leaders know that. Okay, what was the next part of that? I forgot what were you saying?
What the Manong history was in California and what it means.
Yeah. When this generation of Manongs and Manangs, you know, they were my parents' generation, I guess. They were recruited from the Philippines mainly in the 1920s, 30s, 40s for labor purposes, right? Cheap labor, and their children became the generation before me. But when I was 21 in my teens, I was getting sort of conscious. Vietnam, everything was happening. Ethnic studies, the gay rights, the sexual, everything was happening at the same time. So around that time, my father, who worked in the consulate, that's how I got to Vancouver to begin with. It's sort of tied with that. We got out of the Philippines because my father was a foreign officer, so he went to the Vancouver, opened the Vancouver consulate there, the first one in Canada. Then we came here and because he was in the consulate here, he had a lot of connections. He had a pouch. So if you're a consular officer, I was a dependent of a diplomat. Actually, I was immune, just like in a lot of laws, but I didn't know. But twice a year, my father's pouch, it's called pouch, from the Philippines would arrive, and anything you ordered would come. Some people order, I don't know, different things, but my dad didn't take advantage of it. But he did get 2 cases of whiskey, Canadian whiskey, every 6 months, and he didn't drink. My dad never drank. He didn't dance, didn't do anything. But his friends knew the days. And every time my house, our flat on 27th Avenue, would gather all those people that I hadn't seen before, it was because the Pouts had come and they were waiting for their share from my dad. My dad's thing was that in the summer, you take care of my son, you put him to work. And those were the foremen of the canneries and the Delano foreman. So one was Marcelino Divina, and that's how I connected with all those workers. While I was working all those works, during the summer, I was going to school. So I was like, I guess folks have done it, but school year I was an academic and I was a student. I became a teacher later, but summertime I was a worker. Because that's all my job had been in the summertime, and I developed friendship in those years. And it was history that was being made that I didn't know till later on. And I remember all the Carlos Bulosan, not all, but most of those turning point characters in our history, such as Chavez, of course. I was at that age that I was a teenager, of course, that I knew something was ending and something was beginning. I just didn't know what it was. But I knew I was a writer, and there was so many stories around me, I didn't know where to start. So I just went and put all those together in my writing, and it became a voice. It helped me find my voice as a writer. Very important to find your voice as an artist, so that way you don't copy anybody else, you're yourself, and when you put it out there, it's that's all there is.
How old were you when you were working in the cannery?
When I first worked in the canneries, I was 21. But I first worked in the farms, I was 17, 18. For my first year, my first summer, Vallejo, out there near Vallejo. I worked in the Susun Valley. Yeah.
And there's where you start writing?
14 in Canada, I started writing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 21. I remember those Alascaros. They were the first one who turned me on to weed over there in Alaska. They let me smoke the thing and they left me alone in the middle of the night.
So when you went to Alaska?
1966.
You were how old?
21.
Oh, okay.
21, yeah.
You were to work there?
Yes, I went to work because of my father's connection. The one I worked in Alaska, because the same foreman, the same jefe that hired Alascaros, he was there. He was also a jefe in the campos. Same guy, Marcelino Divina. So the top workers that he had in the campos went with him to Alaska. And those are the people that I connect with.
Tell us a little bit about that experience. Sounds like it was just an easy, nice job in the cannery.
Yeah. Well, my father probably had different things than I did. I went there because my older brother had gone 1 year before and he didn't want to go anymore. And I was doing other summer jobs before, like I said, I was in Delano before, I was in Susun Valley. So I was kind of familiar with the workers, and the same workers were there. So when I went to Seattle to go to Alaska to be an Alascaro, I didn't know who to see to get the thing because it was kind of under the table, a lot of crooked. I didn't know which one was illegal or legal, so I applied the legal way, and we were waiting and waiting every day. We were there, we were almost starving in a hotel, $5 a week, the hotel. And finally, I went to see this Marcelino Divina, and he was there, and he told me, I wrote about it here. He cussed me up right away. When he saw, I said, you Marcelino Divina? He said, yes. I said, I'm Florentino Peneranda's son. He said, fuck, he started cussing me right away. Why didn't you tell me? He knew I was there. Why didn't you tell me? We're leaving tomorrow. Everything is fixed already. Then he saw my two friends, 3 of us. What about them? No. He said, okay, wait. He goes to this. I saw him across the hall, talk to some people, and those people were kind of Carlos Bolosan's generation. Then he came out, and he said, okay, those two guys, they're not going to be the same cannery as you, so you tell them, but I'll give them a job, he said. You come with us, our cannery, he said. There's a guy there there's a guy in jail that I'm supposed to bail out, but I'm not gonna bail him out. You can take his place. Because this guy, twice already, he's an asshole, you know, but he's a good worker. He said, I hate to lose him, but he doesn't learn. So, so you'll take his place. So I became the forklift driver my first year. That's how and every year when you get into the union, of course, that's why I went every year. I didn't want to hassle into reapplying again the next year if I miss it. So every year I went. But every year I swore I'd never go back. The work was so hard. But after the work was finished, you forget about it already.
So you went seasonal? How? Every summer or every winter?
Yeah, 15 every year, never missed.
15 years?
Yeah,
So you are a teacher here in the winter, and then you go in the summer to work there?
correct. Yeah,
No?
yeah. 2 years.
That's wow.
Yeah, 2 years I was in jail over there.
Why?
Not 2 years, but I think 2 months. 2 months during from the summer to near the fall. I had to call here. I cannot teach this semester. I had to call ethnic studies. I'm in jail here.
Why are you in jail?
Because of drugs.
Ah.
5 of us was in a trailer, you know, like this. You know, it was my friend. I got this trailer from a pool hall friend of mine. I rented it, and I had 2 friends, the 3 of us, and one of my friends had a girlfriend, so they had a little bedroom there. There was a kitchen here. There's 2 smaller. So it's like trailer park, rented it, my name. My friend, he was selling drugs all the time, and Alex Miguel is from Salinas, man. He passed away already. He was the worst person to sell. He was one of these real cocky guys, you know. You know, when you sell drugs, I was smart enough to know. Then you try to keep it low, you know. He'd go in the bar. Hey, what do you need, man? I got what you need. So he sold to 6 undercover police, and there were only 6 in Kodiak. I was in Kodiak, Alaska at this time, and there were only 6 at the time. And the name of the trailer where he did drugs under my name. So it's possession or whatever they wanted, you know. So but I got it. I wrote about it too. I got it. They have a name for it. Expunge. After 5 years, they erased it or something. I don't think they erased it because a couple of times I said, they said, "Did you ever get under arrest?" You know those. I don't know what to say, yes or no, and then under arrest. So one time I said no, and they said, "Oh, you were." So
Yeah, there's one of the great stories you told. I saw you when we first met. You told the story about how the Philippines took 42 years longer to be conquered by Magellan. Mexico got knocked off quick. Philippines and Magellan's buried in the Philippines. Then you went on to say how, I think I asked you, how we got the same last names.
Yeah.
And your thing about how in the Philippines the Spanish names came to the Philippines because we're all mestizos that way, but tell
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because Peneranda, that's not a Filipino name. No? What is your last name? Bob?
Guisan, but it's supposed to sound ethnically Chinese.
Yeah,
to fit in with like
that's
the
Chinese.
elites
Yeah,
of the Philippines.
it's Chinese.
What are the other names? What are your other last
your
names?
name?
Filipino names.
Antonio.
Antonio, it's a Hispanic name. That's from Spain.
And
Miranda,
Miranda.
Del Rosario.
Castillo.
My mother's maiden name was Viegas.
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 Here we go. This is the start of the story. You're gonna like
Well,
it.
without Spanish last
Oh.
You're gonna like this.
So okay, you know when you're a teacher, you gotta catch your students within a week. You gotta. Yeah, I found this out later when I you have to touch their spirit within a week somehow, or else you can't teach them. You can't teach anybody if they don't want to learn. You just can't. You have to make them want to learn. So, anyways, but what did you say? What was that? I was commenting.
So you're talking about how they got the Spanish names in all the Philippines. How that happened?
Yeah. So my thing when I found out when I call roll, I can get and through their names, especially in names with. How did people, Filipinos like me, get a Hispanic name? But the same with the Mexicans and the other names here and in Spain, and the other ones don't. So they know we're under Spanish, but you see, it's one of my try to connect is that in 1842, no, Claveria, this guy Claveria, the Philippines was ruled by a governor general from Mexico until Mexico got their independence in 1821. After that, it was from Spain. So that guy, Claveria, he had this brilliant. I think it was a good idea, administered to put all the Filipinos to sort of keep an eye on them, but and also to make them change their names to Hispanic names. Either they're getting confused, probably a combination. They were getting confused, So they said, the Filipinos who don't want to, how are you going to convince them? So he said that the leadership of the Filipinos, the Spanish told them they can keep their name, but their followers, make them change to this name so we can keep track of them. Mm-hmm. So they got them through and until now, my father, who's born in 1904, he died in 1997. When you told him what your last name is, Peneranda, for example, he can tell you where that's from. He can tell you where in the Philippines, because you remember that law sectionalized the Filipinos, and there's what their names, so that it's easy to tax them, it's easy to follow, whatever, to control them. That's for the control and other purposes. But two sets of people did not go for that stuff, and one was of course, the ruling class. They didn't go. They didn't have to change their name, and the other class and the other people who rebelled and said, "Fuck you! I'm not changing my name." We went up to the hills and fought. Mm-hmm. So if you have a non-Hispanic name, like a Batumbakal or like that, you come from royalty or freedom fighters. Because a lot of them don't know, and sometimes they change it to make it sound like westernized.
What's that?
Yeah, sometimes they change it. I said to make that their names sound more westernized when they don't really have to. So, yeah.
One of my cousins, he's half Filipino, but his family's last name is Sochaisen.
Mm-hmm.
But when you kind of sound it out, it's supposed to sound similar to what phonetically would be like the Chinese elite in the Philippines back then.
Yeah.
So they could blend it. So Sochaisen.
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah.
The naming is really interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Even until now, I always kind of trying to notice how much of these old values are still practiced. The names are still important until now. People, I go to the Philippines, especially after I retired once a year, and sometimes people come with me, and I who's never been there because they don't know to speak the language or they don't know who to contact. Some are Filipino, some are not, but so come with me, and then that's what were you saying?
For which one? The last names?
The last names?
Yeah. So and then I hear the last name. I said, if you tell me your last name and any place,
you'll know where you're from.
And I'm not a detective. I found 100% of them, all of them. Man. I went to a library. I was taking a piss one time. I went to this library. I asked around. Yeah, they know. One I found in the graveyard. Yeah.
Like on the topic of like what Richard was talking about, like Magellan and then him being killed by Lapu-Lapu. I feel like for a lot of us that weren't exposed to it, Filipino and Filipino-American history stops at the age of Catholicism. Can you talk about like what indigenous Philippines look like with the Babaylans, Babayin, the Datus, and stuff like that?
Okay, William Henry Scott, so read anything by him. He's one of these white guys who went there and married the people that he wrote about, and he lived there until he died, this guy. And he went to every conference and almost didn't dress up or anything. So that guy, he was really like that. So you were saying?
Like what did indigenous Philippines look like? Because that's I feel like it's something that's not exposed.
Okay, yeah. So if that's what, to me, we start with the women. In the when the Spanish came in the 1500s, 1600s. There's only about 5 or 6 people in that crew of 200 that could read and write Spanish. The captain, I guess the co-captain, the priest, the historian, a couple of others. But the rest are criminals, actually. They can't read or write. They just work it. When they got to the Philippines, these priests, they wrote their observation on the plans and all this shit. And several of them observed these Filipinos, they know how to read and write. They had our syllabary, the one that the young people are, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. These people know to, and 75% of the men were reading and writing. 100% of the women were reading. 100%, every fucking one of the women. All the contracts were made by women. The divorce was there, all kinds of stuff. And so, and that presence of our women until today. The colonials, the Spanish and the Americans and Japanese tried to change it. No. So I think that our indigenization, you have to start with our women. That's all. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think a lot of things that get overlooked is that in some portions of the Philippines, right, it was a matriarchal society led by the Babaylans.
Yeah.
Until now.
Until now.
Yeah,
Something
until now.
you can't erase, right?
Exactly.
Like how the strength of the women in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Because they even had women priests back then.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, and then they have men who dress up as women because the women are so strong.
The original meaning of baka,
Yeah.
link between man and woman, baka.
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, no, I know nothing happens in a household till the woman approves or disapproves. Yeah.
So the woman has the power in the Philippines.
Yeah.
It's a woman's country.
My
Yeah.
mom says that.
Mario, even in America, if it's a Filipino wife, and an American husband, it's still the
It's
wife
here.
who has
It's
the
here,
power.
yeah.
My mom
I
don't
can wait. I don't
And until it's here, the place don't matter. It's they can be. I imagine Italy, wherever they are, it's the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think with Catholicism and with the other like colonialists, right? Like they tried to like put women on the side, but
Yes.
and then women learn to kind of navigate through it and
Yeah.
like do it like very subtly, but
Yeah.
then in the end, like it's
Yeah.
just not obvious, but they're still, they're that equal.
Yeah.
It did do like a lot of damage. Like the spiritual leaders are known as like Babaylans, pre-colonial. Like what I learned from school from Dr. Mabalon and Allison and them. When Spaniards came over, they started telling stories of our Babaylans, and they turned them into this folklore called Manananggal.
Yeah.
So one who eats babies, and it's like this demonic character. So like Catholicism and like Spain really tried to reverse like our like view of like indigenous culture, but it just showed how powerful women were in indigenous Filipino culture.
And when was that? What's the time period?
That was
Well, they came.
yeah.
They came around 1600.
So pretty much from the beginning to about the 1600s was when.
No, I think from 100 years ago, the Spanish, we kicked them out. The U.S. Americans came and tried to mess with us for 50 years. And then the Japanese came. They tried to do the same thing for 3 years.
So the Spanish, the Americans?
The Spanish for 300, the Americans for 15, and the Japanese for 3.
Yeah.
But that was during World War II.
Yeah.
We had a lot of renters.
So when was the independence
yes.
of the Philippines from Spain?
Yeah, the independence, I wrote about it too. It's good to know. I'm glad you asked that question. Because the independence here in the U.S. is, when was it? July 4th? What year was that? You remember? 1776. Huh?
What was it?
1776.
Yeah, July 4th, 1776. That's when they declared independence. So you mark the independence of a country by its declaration of independence, not by its achievement of independence, by its declaration. So July 4th, 1776, the United States declared Then they had a war until 1789 with the British. They finally wrote the Constitution and they named themselves the United States of America. 1776, 17. The Philippines, 1898. No. 1898, the United States came to the Philippines, 1898, May 1. And before that, 330 years, we've been under the Spanish. In the last 3 years, we've been revolting under them. 1896, we've been revolting under them. We were beating them already. We were losing from everyone. And they were holed up in this Intramuros place where all the Spaniards were holding. And when the Americans came, they did all kinds of very suspicious things that the Filipino generals were saying, you know, we're getting rid of the Spanish. And we asked the Americans gave them permission to come here. This is during the Spanish-American War. So that we can beat the Spanish. But then now, we beat the Spanish, and then they're celebrating the victory over the Spanish, not us. The U.S., the Filipino soldiers were told to stand in the back, you know, not enter. Then the flag, the U.S. flag came, the Spanish flag came down. And the Filipino general said to the Filipino president at the time, was also a general, Mr. President, Aguinaldo was his name. You see what we told you? They're just replacing Spain. Because our president at the time trusted the U.S. and let them enter the Philippines. So a few months after that, we had to declare war against the United States. We had to declare independence against the United States. So 1898, June 12, pretty soon, we declared independence. The way the Americans did in 1776, the way. But we did not. When we achieved that independence was much later, 1946. Because when the Americans came and we declared our independence, we had to fight the U.S. Americans. We had to fight them for 16 years. You know? Many people say 2 years, 3 years. I wrote about it. I wrote about that war that not too many people know about here in this book too. Because that war ended, nobody knows where it ended. It was not a declared war. So people were dying there till 1916. It started in 1899.
And can you share with them how much the Philippines was sold to the U.S.?
Yeah. 1 out of every 9 Filipinos in that war died. In the Second World War, 1 out of every 30 or 40 Filipinos died. Much more that nobody knows about. And then you were asking, I'm sorry.
Then how much was the Philippines sold to the U.S.?
When the negotiation for who owns the Philippines came in Paris, December 10th of 1898, 4 months later, just 4 months later, they had the Treaty of Paris. Spain would not give the U.S. the Philippines until they got some kind of money from it or whatever. You know, but they were gonna lose anyway. They were already talking negotiations even before they faked the battle in Manila. They faked the battle there. When it was already the result was already done. You know, they faked the battle. But for $20 million, the Spanish delegation were agreeable to sign off their property of Guam. You were saying you're from Guam?
Yeah, born there.
Oh, born there.
In the
Philippines, Marianas Islands, a couple of other small islands. Those were but Puerto Rico and Cuba were different. So those were sold with the Philippines for $20 million. They took over. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you studied like American books and
Yeah.
you wanted to also learn more about Black and Brown
Yeah,
history.
yeah.
Were there any, I guess, authors from the Philippines that you really studied, like Jose Rizal? Because I know he really wrote about like the Kasaysayan or the history of the Philippines a lot, and kind of made it into like folk tale. So what did you do?
Yeah, well, I was 12 when I left, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And the folk tales that you're talking about, I heard of and read them when I was small, and I still like them until now. In fact, I still do it. What was your question about them?
So about like Jose Rizal, I know he I had to study him a lot. And
You-
so his like books kind of shared stories about
Yeah.
our history, right? But it also came with truth, but he kind of made like a little spin on it. So how were you able to like study those types of books as well about the Philippines?
Yeah, yeah. I like Jose Rizal's books. Yeah, I think his book was, but in college already. In high school, I remember not too strong in history, the Philippines, of their own and other folks. They're not too strong. Yeah. But they're strong on myths and stories. You know? I hear it all around,
Yeah.
and that's how.
Like Nani Matanghe or
Yeah.
Mysteries.
Yeah, yeah,
Boundaries are hard to read.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's very
yeah.
You mentioned a little bit about Filipino mythology, and I think that's like another thing that gets really overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give folks a brief snippet about Bathala?
Mm.
You know about
Yeah,
Bathala?
yeah, Bathala and Bahala na to remind me to explain that. So, Bathala is our word for supreme being, no? Our God Bathala. Other areas in the Philippines, indigenous Philippines, have a different name for their supreme being. Some sounds like Bathala, some are different. Kabunyan in Ifugao, but it's the same idea. No? And your question,
I'm just giving people a brief
yeah.
snippet. Yeah.
And then so that there is a saying in our in our language called bahala na. It's also an attitude that people. I'm glad you asked the question because people have a misconception of this thing, this bahala na attitude that they say Filipinos have. It's that it's something like mañana that they stereotype. It's like you're gonna go into something. Whatever happens, whatever, whatever. So that's bahala na. So they don't care. You know, that's couldn't be further from the truth because that Bathala, that's a supreme God. You know, it's not that care. When that Bahala came, that's a that's a ceremony that that people that warriors used to go to. You know, they fast for a few days. They anoint themselves in holy oil, and then they march into battle, and they cry the battle cry. Bahala na. We leave our. So you prepare, then you leave your faith to the Supreme Being. It's not whatever. No? You don't go into a battle saying, whatever. No, it's something. It's for the strong inside. It's not for the weak inside. But it's been misunderstood and misused as an excuse to get away with not doing anything. Bahala, fuck it. Yeah. Utang na loob too is the same.
Utang na loob.
What do you understand about that? That's an important.
Utang na loob. From like again, like coming from like my experience, utang na loob on like the most surface, like above the surface meaning is like, for an example, is like my parents took care of me, therefore I need to take care of them.
Yeah.
But utang na loob really translates to the debt within,
Mhm.
and it's like that integral, just that idea of like really deep empathy
Mhm.
that you're there for like the other person.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
can be spun as like a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. I think that people spin it the bad way because authority likes it that way. That interpretation. Our parents like it that way. You owe me all kinds of shit. I raised you, man. You don't owe me. They like that stuff. Right? The church, Catholic Church. Oh, you owe me your soul. They like that utang. But that's not utang na loob. Because utang means debt and loob means inside, no? In our language, debt inside. And those two are the two indigenous values that we hold. You know, what's important in a person is what's inside a person. And then if you feel like you have to do something, you need a debt to do it, you got to do it. So those are the two things that do it. But it has nothing to do with favors, you know. I'm only going to do it to you if you do it to me. You know? Because if it has something to do with favors, the authority, your parents, the government, the Catholic Church will forever be asking for your utang na loob. It's always the master who will give the debt. So it's always the one that with the less powerful who will have utang na loob. So that's not the right. Utang na loob is me. I want to be good to you because I'm a human being and you're a human being. Period. There's no favoritism. But then, so you try to explain that to them. But the authorities usually like that guilt thing. No, yes.
That also reminds me of the phrase walang hiya.
Yeah.
It's basically saying that shame on you. But then really, it's saying, it's not really shame, it's just saying that you're proud of who you are.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it turns into a negative connotation.
Yeah, that
But-
walang hiya, it's another one like that. Because here they translate it like the English translation of the Japanese shame.
No shame.
No, but here it's not shame. It's impropriety. It's impropriety. If you don't have like if you go to church with a bathing suit, that's walang hiya, right? It's not impropriety. That's impropriety. But if you're going to be ashamed of your name, or you're going to be ashamed because you're going to be, that's not walang hiya. It's different. Yeah.
I think also like with going back to like utang na loob, like if you've ever been to like a Filipino person's house or a family's house, the first thing that they do is like, did you eat already?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think that's like one of the biggest like, representations of like utang na loob and kapwa.
Yes, yeah.
The hospitality.
The hospitality, yeah.
And if you're smart, you bring your bowl.
Bring your Tupperware with you. I think they get mad if you don't bring food home.
That's what I always tell my son every single day. Finish your bound. Finish your lunch.
O.J. Simpson used to steal he used to mug my friends.
He went to high school with O.J. Simpson.
He used to for their bound because he knows the Pinays, their mothers make the best meal, man. He bullies them and give me a lunch, boy. That's why I thought he was guilty all the time. But I didn't tell him.
But then all the things you mentioned reminds me of how I think a big thing of the Filipino culture is that we're a sharing and giving culture.
Yeah.
And can
Yeah.
you
For
talk
what?
more? We're a sharing and giving culture.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
exceptionally
Yeah.
on
we
that
are.
side. Can you talk more about that?
Sure, yeah. You go to the Philippines, you get warned, don't go there, man, you're going to get kidnapped, you're going to get this, you're going to do this, or this. This fucking guys. In my let's say, I lost my cell phone 3 times, came back to me, taxi, guy from Bulacan, brought back. My brother lost his computer in the taxi, calls me on the plane, Oscar, I think I left it and the guy, I contact the guy in the taxi, he says, yes, I have it. Can I get it? I said, from my brother. No, you cannot, your brother has to get it. I'm going to lose my job, he said. So I found out the honest people are the poor people. It's the rich people who are fucking assholes. They just keep stealing. So, that's what I sort of, and you asked me, who was the one that you...
Yeah, that we're an exceptionally giving and sharing culture.
It's because a few times, you drive your car, several times it happened, and then you get stuck in the mud in the forest, like this. Happened to me once. Within about 5 minutes, all these guys come from the hills. I don't know where the hell they came from. It's coming there with a smile, They push the car, they lift it up, they push it, and then they disappeared.
Yeah.
That's the way they are.
I've had like my fair share of experience too. Like, sorry, I cut you off.
No, right, yeah.
So I actually I dropped my phone in a sewage hole,
Mm.
and it was in my friend's house, so I knew nobody, and I was just like trying to grab it, but I didn't want to touch it.
Yeah.
And then all the people around me, they were just like the neighbors, yayas and like drivers, and they saw me and they were like, "Oh, what is that?" And all of them, maybe for 2 to 3 hours, were helping me pick up my phone from the sewer. And they called everyone, they called who they knew, and maybe 4 or 5 houses were helping me just get my
They
phone.
do. Yeah, that's what they do, Yeah. You go to a store here, you ask somebody, where is such and such? They'll still go around and help you. You ask somebody, before you ask the person, 3 will come.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's over here. Yeah, I got it here. Never is it one-on-one. It's always marami sila. and it's kind of I got in a commercial. I might be still on YouTube. I got into a movie, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah, about 10 years ago. Max fried chicken.
Really?
Yes. So when I go eat at the night there, they're like, oh, this guy, you're the Lolo. I'm a grandfather. You're the Lolo in the commercial. Yeah. And I said, your chicken is getting cold, man. Give it to her. No, I'm telling you, were the Lolo. She keeps talking to me. Well, the customer's waiting for the food, man.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences in the languages differences around different parts of the Philippines?
Yeah. How many do you think how many languages do you think we have in the Philippines? Take a guess. 10? 200 over.
Wow.
Over. That's why we're the crazy people. The crazy people, yeah.
200.
Over.
And is it regional?
Yeah. We have, of course, a national language where they start in the school, and then different states or provinces have mostly a language of their own. They teach that in school too. But all the languages, yeah. And it surprises me until now that more Filipinos in the Philippines now, I mean, less of them know of other languages. So the Tagalog people in the Philippines, people in the Quezon City, for example, they don't know too much about where I was born, Barugo, Leyte. And that's the same country, so they don't. So consequently, they only know Tagalog. They don't know Tagalog and Bisaya like me, because I went for my father's time, where they traveled less. I assume they knew more languages. I don't know why. Almost all my aunties spoke 3 Filipino languages.
How many do you know?
4. Yeah.
What are the most prevalent?
Oh, sorry. Like out of the 200, you know the 4. So you know even other languages as well, aside from like Philippine languages.
Yeah, I had to take French and Spanish in school. Yeah.
I just want to say, like, I appreciate that you call like the languages. Because me and my fiance, we always get into an argument because she speaks Ilonggo, and she we always get into an argument of is it a dialect or is it a language. I'm a proponent of calling it a language because if you call it like a dialect, you're saying there's like one centralized thing where everything came out from, but I can't understand what she's saying. So I just appreciate that you mentioned that it's a language.
You don't understand what they're saying. That's a different language. That's that's the way it's called, a different language.
What are the most prevalent besides Tagalog?
Probably now let me say something about the Tagalog. The Tagalog is a language of a certain region, right? But it became a national language sometime in the past for as long as until 1987. So in 1987, they had a new constitution in which the language of Tagalog, the national language, was not called Tagalog anymore, but Filipino as the national language, which is 99.9% Tagalog. But they didn't want to say it because they didn't want to offend the other languages, right? Because Tagalog people in Manila has been the seat of government for centuries. So it's always been like imperial in its attitude, and the others resent it. I know, because I'm Waray, I'm not from there, I'm from Leyte. So they resent it. My ancestors don't like to speak Tagalog, they're not educated, I don't know, they got all kinds of bad names for them. But now it's called Filipino. But the Tagalog people and language is still there. So the language now is Filipino, and then it's mostly Tagalog, and the language taught here usually is going to be Filipino or Tagalog. There's in the Visayan languages that you say, I like what he's saying. I don't want to say Visayan because Visayan is not a language. Visayan has about 10 languages in it. You know? There's Hiligaynon, that's the one in Ilonggo, Waray-Waray, Aklano, many, Cebuano, Kinaraya. That's all Visayan. Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit about why English is very prevalent in the Philippines?
Yeah, okay. One, I think, is just like what I said. There's 200 languages. You got to pick one, so that so it's English that facilitates language, ironically, more efficiently than any other language spoken there after their own language. Maybe after Filipino, like you say, after the national language. The next is English, because parts of Philippines, they'd rather not speak Ilocano. They'd rather speak English. And those people in the Ilocos. Same with people in Dumaguete.
So is that more of like a colonized?
Yeah, to me, yeah, I think it is because our education system don't do a good enough job to really make themselves feel good about their own. You know, that's our system, educational system failure. But most of our leaders now that really don't see that as important. That's part of the problem. Yeah.
I think mentioning like the topic of like colonial mentality.
Yeah.
Can you kind of dive in on what your take on colonial mentality is, especially for Filipino Americans?
Yeah. Colonial mentality basically is when you think that others are better than your own, especially your colonizers. And that's colonial mentality. You know? And then you're
just your take on it.
Yeah.
I think that answers it. Yeah. Like why we're so tied to like American stuff.
Yeah. So it's already imperial because U.S. is hard not to be influenced by the U.S. We're all over the place. You know?
I think too that like just when I hear stories from my grandparents, it seems like Filipinos favor the Americans over the colonizers just because of how they were treated, and then also like how the education system was set up. Like the Spanish didn't really set up an education system because it was worked for their advantage, but then for the Americans they set up the educational system. So I feel like maybe they're teaching English a lot, like as the main, maybe secondary language, because of it's already set up that way that it's in English, and so they just let it be. I think now they're teaching more of the Filipino language, but then not the other like regional languages.
Yeah, unless it's that region.
Unless it's that region. So, for example, Ronnie, he's not here. He's our accountant. He speaks, I think, Cebuano, and I speak Tagalog. So we don't for us, we speak in English because it's easier that way.
Yeah. Also, when you were saying that's a good point that you brought that up because I wanted to give you my take on when the U.S. came, they gave education, public education when the Spanish didn't do it, and they built roads. But they didn't do it the Spanish didn't do it to benefit the Filipino people. So they built roads so that the U.S. didn't do it to benefit them. They built roads so that the U.S. Army can go all over the goddamn place. And it's really for them that they built. So they built the Jeeps, the one that we have now, is for the military. So first they did it for their own, and then whatever benefits we have, we got. But that's why the colonial mentality was still there, even though now, and also the U.S. mas magaling is much better until today in the world is better at propaganda than anybody else. You know, they're good at it. They're good with their media.
Oscar, you go back every year now. In all the years since you were a child, how would you describe the changes in the Philippines or where you're from specifically, and the status of the Philippines today?
Yeah, it's good that you asked that, Richard, because it's some kind of a cycle. You know, the president was the father of this president. When I was your age, when I was in my 30s, it was the father, the president. It was a dictator who was his father, and then, in my estimation of where the Philippines is politically, and it's not in a better place. I think I think we could have more participation with the members of the different factions of the group, which is sad to me because the Filipinos, if you can get them together, you can do all kinds of creative, fantastic stuff. But these guys, I guess it's the same here. It's the corporate stuff that they always take care of. All the statistics are, this is good because it's good for the GNP or whatever it's called, GN. That's good for. But the common Filipino worker, they don't make enough to really to make it. The workers' rights there is not strong. I don't know what the minimum wage is. To me, I think if the Philippines need to get better, they have to start with the working class. You got to build that up because they work a lot. They do a lot of stuff. They just don't get paid enough.
I think too, to your point earlier about knowing your history,
Yeah.
like that's the important thing, right? You need to know the meaning behind the history,
Yeah.
so you don't repeat it.
Correct.
Because then
Yeah.
right now
Yeah.
it's repeating.
Yeah, yeah. No, most folks think that no, that history is there for us to like or not like. It's not there for us to like or not like. You know, it's for us to learn from. You know, learn from it. What's the meaning in it for us? You know.
I think also like the fact that like it's hard to get the working class in the Philippines together solely on the fact that the Philippines, their biggest export is people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're the largest Asian
Yeah.
diaspora in the world, right?
Yeah.
And you find us in all these different places, and it's like, how do you get the people together if we're constantly being shipped out? So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good point that you made too about not being able to get those people together, is because they created that system to
Yeah.
make sure that they can't get together.
Yeah.
I have a question, like in connection to like change. I know you visit the Philippines a lot, and you teach you teach Philippine history or
There or here?
or both.
Yeah, both. I teach Philippine American, and U.S. Yeah.
Did you notice any like difference between people who grew up in the Philippines and people who grew up here that are Filipinos that are interested in the Philippines? Like, are there any differences with their interests and how much they crave Filipino culture?
Yeah, that's an age. I'm glad you asked that observation or question, because there is a difference, and sometimes the difference is, and I see it every day, you know. And to me, sometimes they can't get work done because of that difference. They don't see each other correctly, or you don't, because of a certain thing. And then it's kind of complicated, but I don't know where to start with this one. But Filipino, U.S. Americans and Philippine homeland Filipinos, different in first of all the mainstream. So the Filipinos, they're used to being the mainstream because they're the Christian, unless they're they come here, they're not the mainstream anymore. So the Filipinos here, they know they're not the mainstream. They know they're not just being the mainstream at all. So these people sometimes, both of them come together. They have this expectation that used to be part of the mainstream. I don't know what you're complaining about. First, I think it's good to have those dialogue between those, and also probably Mexican and Chinese born probably have the same type of thing. You know, it's good to have those dialogue with the homeland and the diaspora, because first I think they need humility. You know, the ego is too much on the table. You know. When you come together like that, it's good to go with not this attitude. I'm going to teach him a few things that he doesn't know. No, you just go there and like humility. You know, yeah, that's what I notice when people start arguing. They don't have it. They don't have it. So, because the U.S., if you're U.S. born and raised, you tend to think you're number one, because the U.S. all wants it. The whole world wants the U.S. to be number one. That's our business, is to be number one. You know? You lose in the Super Bowl, fuck you. You're no good. Yeah? You beat 30 other teams. You beat the other 30 other teams. Right? So that's our thing. So that mentality is it. So the Filipinos in the Philippines, they think, well, who are these guys trying to be Filipino? I'm born here. They don't. The fuck, the guy's from New York. What the fuck? Does he know? Like this, like that. Tell them. So you need to come down and just be humble and just learn from it. Then you'll find all kinds of. To me, they're both interesting. I love them both. Yeah.
How about, can you tell us a little something about the greatest Filipino Mexican beater and his political career? What's happening with Manny Pacquiao?
Okay. I was in the three of his fights with the Mexicans.
And you won them all.
Yeah. But there was a third one. Okay, he was beaten by Marquez the other time. Okay, so Manny Pacquiao, I went to his hometown. Twice. You know, he's a politician now. He ran for president. I went to his hometown. He ran there. He lost in his hometown. So I went around asking the people, how did Manny Pacquiao? Nationally, he won. And then, you know, in his hometown, we want him to stay a boxer, sir. He's the best boxer in the world, but get away from the other. So that's what they wanted to. But lately I haven't heard from him, Manny Pacquiao. Huh?
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
He became
And he also, I also are in touch with his mother-in-law. No, he says mother. Who is that? The older lady who's hanging around with the cougar. The mother, isn't it? Junicia? Who's
Yeah, his mom.
His mom?
The one with the rosary during the fight. Right.
Yeah. She always has a young boyfriend. That guy. I know more about her and him because she's from my home, my people, Waray and Nanay Pacquiao, from my area. Yeah.
My last question I would have is, in all your experience, from the Filipino experience, what have you learned for all these years?
I think two things. One is you don't. If you want to change something, you don't have to have it all together before you start it. You don't have to wait. I got to do this before I start it. Just start it. If you think you got enough and you got the better things, start it. Other people can finish it better than you. You know, you don't think that you're big enough to start and then I want to finish it because I started it and I want to be. No, maybe you're just there for the start and you were the best starter. So you just start the movement and let it go as it goes. And the second part is that sort of a generality in life. You know how it is when you always ask, what are you going to school for? What are you here for? Why were you born? All these philosophical questions. You know, I think we were put here to help each other out bear this sometimes unbearable life. We're all here.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. Anyone else have any questions?
Thank you for your.
Well,
I like this.
we're not. No, wait, you had something.
If
I
next
thought,
time.
yeah, please.
So because you've moved around a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like from, you were 12, you said, when you left the Philippines, and you moved to Vancouver, you went to Alaska, you went here. So I'm just curious, like, how did you preserve your Filipino identity? Because we always hear, when you move to another place, assimilate, right? So how did you keep your Filipino identity?
That's a good question too. I mean, that's a good thing because you are right. I watch my contemporaries, fellow Filipinos around me, and they sometimes lose that. And I never really had that angst of losing my. I was always there in my. I think one is because we spoke Waray, our language. Like I said, that's the number one vessel of culture. We spoke that language wherever we were in the world. We only spoke that. My mother, father, and brother and sister. And number two, the state of life that I had when I left the Philippines was so vibrant. When you're a boy, everything is fun. There's no responsibility. You just go all over the. So I still have that memory when I was there, and it started me writing. I started writing my friends. When I went there the first time, I went back when I was 31 years old, martial law, in the middle of martial law. This guy sleeping beside me with a gun, shit, in the ship. But, what was, you see, I lost my point.
How did you keep your Filipino identity throughout the years after moving? And, whenever you move, usually we're told we have to assimilate, right?
Yeah. So when I went there, I came back for the first time. I went to my childhood area where I grew up, and I looked around for the guys. So that was 19 years, 20 years later. So I saw somebody there on the sidewalk, and I said, and he told me who he was, Lito. I remember him not one of my main friends, but I remember him. And I said, is so-and-so still here? Is Hilly Tim still here? Is my best friend. Hilly Tim was a black Filipino, was my best friend. It was because we have black Filipinos too, we have so he was, he said, no, he was like that too. And he was so-and-so. I said, is so-and-so still here, remember? And he said, oh yeah. And after about 5 or 6 characters, I was asking him, he said, wait a minute, you remember more than I do. I live here, man. You've gone for 20 years. but I never found them.
But it was the key is remembering those memories that never left you as part of your identity.
Yeah, yeah. So that's what it was when
Cool.
I always had those.
Anybody else? I think we're going to do, if we don't want to go around first, we do with takeaways, and then I want to present a little something, and then maybe get a picture with all of us. Start with Dave. Oh, Sebastian.
Where's Manila town?
Manila Town is in Kearney and Jackson, the corner of Kearney and Jackson.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good question from David. David?
So first of all, thank you very much.
Oh,
and
you're welcome.
I personally appreciate how real you were during this conversation. I mean, a lot of people censor themselves and certain things they don't say or don't want, topics they don't want to touch.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
It feels more real. And then I actually want to thank the other Filipinos here too.
Yes.
Because the dialogue between everybody was very educational. I was born and raised here. And because I'm a mix, my mom, we were talking about assimilating and identity. My father was Jewish, and my mother, who was a big Bible banger, Jewish, they're chosen people, right?
Correct.
So growing up, I went to a Jewish school. I was bar mitzvah. My identity was always more Jewish.
Okay.
But hearing Filipinos talk authentically about the culture always brings out something on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
Because my mom would talk about that stuff with her friends, and I, even as a little kid, I would overhear. So I just appreciate all of you guys for contributing to the conversation.
Thank you.
Because even I learned, stuff, and then the stuff that I didn't learn brought back stuff I knew and forgot that I knew.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, the languages of even your example, Mika, about with Ronnie, and then just speaking the English was just very educational for me and my growth, and just having you be able to bring that out from our team and be able to feel proud and sharing your stories is wonderful and just part of who we want to be as MNC, right? Just embracing and learning about everyone. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We're here to Erica. Thank you, baby.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing everything that you talked about. As David already mentioned, you're very open and willing to discuss any topic, which I really appreciate that. It's just coming from someone with a lot of history and a lot of knowledge. I think it holds close to my heart, especially because that's my home, right? And you being like a professor in Filipino or in the Philippines, you attract more Filipinos about the beauty of the Philippines. So thank you for everything you do.
That's why I go there.
Thank you.
Go back all the time.
I want to thank all of you because I've learned about the Philippines that I didn't know. I just knew a little bit, but now seeing all the 200 languages that you have, and I see the map here in Google Maps, and I see there is a lot of islands around. It's so nice and interesting, so that opens my world a little bit more. And just thank you for sharing. Thank you for. It was really nice.
Yeah, you know that island there, they have 1,062 islands. But you look at another map, they have 7,168 islands, and then they have different figures because depends when they measure it. Because low tide, the island comes up, high tide you can't see. Iba-iba, they have different. You have to know when they took it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really good to hear the discussion of the culture, and it's a good example of the kindness in the culture that I think most people experiences, which has really been really good.
Yeah,
thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming, Oscar. It's always a pleasure to get to listen to you talk about the different history, language, just your own experiences. And I'm really glad that, we could get this group together. A smaller, intimate group, but really just have this nice conversation and learn a lot. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I echo everyone's sentiments about just how much that we learned. I feel like I had a little teaser, just a little taste of a Filipino ethnic studies class. Thank you, and thank you to the others who were able to share the dialogue.
Welcome.
So overall, I'm honestly, words can't describe how grateful I am. I just want to let you know that your contributions to ethnic studies quite literally saved my life.
Oh, wow.
I'm not gonna cry. Yeah. Just being able to kind of hear like your experiences and also being taught under some of like the most prominent like Filipino figures, again, Allison, Don Mabalo, and rest their soul, Roderick Asmagwal, all my mentors, and just kind of seeing like where the origins of their teachings came from. It's you know, it's really grounding and really, I've connected back into it. Like I haven't touched anything ethnic studies in such a long time, mainly because I work on Excel spreadsheets. But just thank you for like everything you've done. And like back when I was at SF State, like training to become like an ethnic studies teacher, going on that track, like I feel like I'm looking at what I wanted to be in the future, like right in front of me. So I just want to say like I'm beyond grateful for what you did today.
And you still can.
Teachers don't make a lot of money. Gotta pay rent.
Watch out, don't rent those trailer park because you know you might.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience, Oscar, and it was really grounding, and it's very. I appreciate the opportunity because I feel like this is the first time we've done a Filipino session at MNC, and it feels nice to talk about our culture.
Yeah.
No, I'm very thankful. Thank you for taking the time and sharing this experience. I've learned so much. I was raised here, so just kind of hearing everybody's conversation, it was just a very valuable experience. Thank you.
And before we allow you to have the last word, I want to mention that one, I'm grateful for the spirit you brought here and all that came out of everyone here. It was a real rich dialogue. I'm also proud to know and learn from you and be your friend. And lastly, you reminded me one of the big core beliefs of my life that I learned in the farmworkers movement in Zeleno was the story of the Manongs. And I lived with them, and I knew them, many of them. And I knew that they're the saddest chapter in American history, in California history, because they were brought here as young boys and never allowed to marry. So they always lived in labor camps. And a lot of the older Manongs, like Sebastian Sahagun, and a bunch of others, Fred Abad, they didn't have children. They used to babysit my children.
There you go. Yeah.
That was the closest they got to having children.
Yeah.
So they're very close to my heart. So thanks for bringing that up. Now, last word, you.
Well, I don't know what to say, but it's to me, it is like a balm, you know, like a medicine, BALM, not a bomb. To sort of to bless me before my trip, you know. This is a great a gathering of I don't know what to call it, but it's a lot of you know, there's a lot of intersection. It feels like a family. It feels like camaraderie. It feels like a professional. It feels like we are in different varieties in the walks of life that brought me together to speak to you through my friend Richard. You know, I don't know. You should try to find out about this guy once in a while too. He's got a history that well, maybe. I don't know how much you can say, but but it's got something. So try to find. But I speak, Richard and I, in our generation of, we were young when a lot of the movements were dying, like I was saying, and a lot were beginning, like ethnic studies. We were in between, and I think our generation needs to be more looked at by the young folks. So.
Thank you very much. I feel we have a little honor we bestow on the distinguished speaker.
Oh my goodness.
And it says,